Welcome, everybody. Today's presentation is on using domain Active Directory security features from within Access. And our wonderful Adrian Bell is our speaker today. Adrian sometimes goes by the nickname, and I don't know if I pronounce this right, Neopa, Neopa?
Perfect.
Okay.
Neopa.
It originated in his gaming days. He's been an Access MVP, concentrating in Microsoft Access almost continually since 2014. Most of that is due to his work on bytes.com, where he also posts as Neopa. And he's worked in IT, covering coding, app design, systems support, and pretty much everything else over the years since he started working way back in 1978. Welcome, Adrian. We're excited to learn about using domain Active Directory security features from Access. And Adrian has asked that you post questions in chat. I will monitor those to make sure that there's nothing that we need to interrupt him for. If there's nothing that's clearly not I don't understand where you're going, we won't interrupt him. We'll take the questions at the end, but feel free to post them as you think of them. Also, if during the presentation, you could make sure that you mute yourself unless you're actively asking a question and turn off your videos so we get as much bandwidth for the recording as possible. Welcome, everybody, and welcome, Adrian. Go ahead and share screen and take it away.
Thank you. My name is Adrian Bell. Let's go by Neopa. Today, start with a main overview. What do we need and why? We'll start with why. As an independent developer particularly, but also when in-house, you will be the first person in line for blame when anything goes wrong. If it's security related, then this is more true and more serious. If any individual has used the same credentials across other systems, financial, banking, etc., then if they get cracked from your system, you may end up in serious trouble. Doesn't often happen, and when you are found responsible, they tend not to drop the house on you, but it is certainly embarrassing and it will be a problem for you. Okay. So what next? Using API calls into Active Directory security is a perfect solution. It's secure. The security itself, the configuration, is managed by IT for the client directly. Thus, we have no direct responsibility. Response times for checking group membership info is pretty minimal. Okay. I'm going to generally avoid talking over the summary parts and just let you read. Before I go much further, both the file I'll be working with, the database file, and this presentation have been passed on to Maria, so she has it. It'll be available from the site when she's ready for you. Okay. So, IT and control, happy client. If they manage security and you simply implement what they've set up, they'll be happy. Working within their own security setup turns Access and your projects into trusted systems. Okay, so simplicity and power. What can I add? It's simple yet powerful. Win-win all round. So, basic demo. Which do I do first? I'll show you this first. The screen on the left is the form that I'm going to use to show you which items my user account, I'm logged on here as adrian.bell, my user account has membership of certain groups. And notice how the options on the left match the underscore items on the right. Most of them are one-to-one. But you may notice both underscore accounts payable and underscore accounts receivable, well, you won't notice because it's not shown here, but they are actually members of underscore accounts. So by being a member of either one, accounts payable or accounts receivable, an account automatically takes membership of accounts, even though that account may not be in accounts directly. That is, I'm going to call that an effective membership. Okay. Thus, a member of either becomes an effective member of underscore accounts, as I said. Right. So I'm going to switch across and show you this running. That's the form. If I open it, first thing it does is it's got 10 different ones to collect information for. So as a matter of course, in most of my projects, I will have a form come up telling you not to worry. It's busy, but it's not dead. Okay, and that's what that big blue one was. So if we go to the next one, in fact, because that will tell us, these are all the underscore groups for the Adrian.Bell account. Okay, and you'll notice there is no human resources, there's no directors, and though there is an accounts payable, underscore accounts payable, there is no underscore accounts receivable. So you'll see that that directly reflects and accurately reflects the security structure that my account has. Okay, now what I'm going to do at this point very quickly is go to the Active Directory. This is where I got that other picture from, of course. Now, I want to change this. I'm going to remove accounts payable. Okay, and then I'm going to add directors. When I apply that, okay, you can now see this is the current situation. It's got directors, but no accounts in there at all. So I'm going to switch back to here, and I've got a button here which says refresh. And so I'm going to do that. Now you'll notice none of the accounts. I only removed one accounts payable group, but it now means that I've got no accounts, so the accounts menu is also disabled. Human resources I didn't add, but directors I did. So that is an accurate portrayal of what my account is allowed to do. Okay, actually in this particular instance, if any of you play with it at home, none of these do anything. I haven't got an OK button. It doesn't go to these menus. So don't be too surprised if you get it and find it does nothing. It's purely an illustration. I'm going to close that now, get back to my presentation. One of the things that I will try to cover later on is the use of SIDs, security IDs. If you look on here, on this picture on the left, you'll see that the underscore IT group is the primary group. Now, the reason you care about that being the primary group is not because it's primary, but because when you get the user object in code, it will have a groups property, which is a collection, and it will include all of the groups except the primary group. And if I bring your attention down here, one of the other properties is primary group ID, but all it's got is a number. Okay, so that's a bit weird. If you look at this item here, this is within my account. It shows my display SID up there, and SIDs come in the stored version, which is underneath value there, and the displayed version, which is what is used for dealing with people. Okay, so the displayed version has all of that information, and the last bit of information, hyphen 1000. That is referred to as the relative ID, because everything before that identifies your domain, the domain that it's within. So my primary group is also in the same domain. So what I have to do essentially is I have to take my SID, strip off the RID, the 1000 bit at the end, but replace it with the RID or the primary group ID of the group. And that's 1126. Now, if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see that that's exactly what the full SID is of that particular group, which is CN equals _IT. So this is a complication of dealing with this stuff. But one of the things you desperately need to do is convert this list of characters down here to the display version of the SID. Okay, complications of code. Now, before I proceed from here, I'm going to try and give thanks. So thank you to all of the people who assisted me getting this code to work. It wasn't straightforward. Two who cannot really remain uncredited are Jeff Griffith and Peter Cole. I know Peter's with us today, so thank you, Peter. This function is in the database, obviously. You call this function with a group name, and it will return a value of either true or false, depending whether that user is a member of that group, but an effective member, not a direct member necessarily. Okay, the part about this code that's interesting is the first part on the left. All of that is, ignore the yellow stuff, that's repeated on the right. All of that is only run the first time you go through it. It gets all the information, but then it stores it. Okay, the stuff on the right is where it goes through the list of SIDs that you've got, and it works out if the group name that you've been given matches any of those in the list. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that running in code. So this is this starting again. Here's the code. I'm going to reset that because it will have remembered stuff from before. I want it to work as if it hadn't. Okay, now apologies for this. Right, I'm going to stop this here. Okay, so I'm going to open that up. Now the first time it comes in here, I'm going to say IsOpMember of the group. I don't know if you can see that, it's quite small. It says _directors. Okay, so I'm going to go in here, and the first thing it's going to do is going to say, do I have opdn set? No, I don't. Every subsequent time that will be set and it will go straight there. This time we're looking at getting the user object from the current operator. That's my account, obviously. Now, I'm going to skip this for now, but that's basically what that does. Obj_var, if it's nothing, then that's failed. It isn't, so I'm going to get the distinguished name and store it in there. And it turns out that is that long string you see there, starting cn equals Adrian.Bell, comma, cn equals users, etc. Okay, and you'll notice up here two items, which are string items, but they are static. This is just a technique to ensure that I don't have to go round the houses every time I come here to calculate what the values are. Once I've got it once, I store it for future use. Okay. This occasion, bool and refresh will be true. Bool and refresh is only required for this demo, because normally once you've got a user's details, they stay the same. But in this case, we're going to be doing, well, I've just shown you earlier how we changed the groups they're a member of and refreshed it, and that only works if you clear your cache, which is that static item up the top. So in this case, we are blank. So we need to go off and get this information. If we haven't got obj_var set already, we have in this case, but if we didn't have, then it would have been set by that next item. It would have gone straight there because we knew the str opdn. Okay, but with obj_var. Now, when you have an IADs object, and that's what we're talking about here, IADs objects are users, groups, and various other things, containers, but we're only dealing with users and groups here. There will be certain properties which are automatically available, but some of them aren't, particularly ones like token groups, for instance, which have work done to produce the list. So I want information that isn't there natively, but has to be processed to get it. So I call from this object getInfoX. So that's get information extended. And I'm passing it. This is a little bit awkward because it's a bit of a weird function. Okay, bit of a method. It wants a list of the items that are the properties that I want it to go and get for me and refresh. If they've got them already, it refreshes them. If they're not already there, it will create them for me. And in this case, I've got a single item. But if I had more items I was interested in, I would add them into that list. So array would produce an array of all those items. As it happens, I only want one item. And so I've got an array of one item. But be aware, I cannot just put that one item. I have to have an array of items with only one element. Okay? This is described as undefined, but it must be a long 0, which is what the ampersand suffix is telling it. Okay? Now, I'm going to run that. Doesn't take long. But now, I've got token groups as a property, and it's a collection or an array. So I can go through each one and add it to STR-SIDs. Now, I'm going to come back later and look at how SID to SIDSTR works, because that's probably one of the most complicated, awkward things to look at. But for now, I'm just going to go through here, get to here, run to cursor. What I'm doing there is every time through the loop, I'm adding to the existing list of SIDs. And you'll notice what we have here is a list of display format SIDs, but at the beginning it's got a comma, which I don't want. So I'm going to strip that comma, and we now have a simple comma-separated list, the SIDs for all the groups that the operator's user account is an effective member of. Okay. Then I come down to here. This is a bit that does all the work. The rest of it is a preparation, but every other time we run this, we won't need to do the preparation. We'll just go straight into this bit. So it'll drop down to there and do that work.
Adrian, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. We have a first question, which we can save till later, but the second question here, I think, is worth interrupting you for.
Go ahead.
Russ wants to know what SID, S-I-D, stands for. And I think that the understanding of that is pretty critical to what you're talking about. So,
and it's something I should have introduced earlier. I apologize for that. A SID is a security ID. If I go back to here, first of all, I'll show it in here. No, I won't. I have to go further away to show the SID, because it's in here. But if I look at the properties here, okay, this is all a bit small. I can't change that, unfortunately.
It's okay, I can see.
Good, I'm pleased with that. Object SID. Now, SID is a security identifier. Okay, so you will notice that I mentioned earlier, if I didn't, I will be mentioning at some point. One of the ways that you can use LDAP to get information is to say, give it a unique identifier. Now, we all know about GUIDs. All of these objects have GUIDs. They also have SIDs, and they are security identifiers. Okay? I won't go into too much detail, but that lists a hierarchy of security. The object is secured by the domain. The domain lists further up into NT, where it gets its authority to give that security from. Okay, so that security ID is also a unique reference to this account. And you'll notice I was talking about primary group ID earlier. That is also shown. This will not include the SID of the primary group, unfortunately, because that would make life a lot easier. But I have to get this SID, the one above, strip off the 1000 and add the 1126 to get the SID of the security group, the primary group, which is on the right here, CN equals _IT. You'll notice that's all the same as my one, except minus 1126 at the end. Okay. Does that answer your question about what SIDs are? Right?
Yes.
You're
Yes.
happy with that? Excellent, thank you. Okay. Right, I will now go back to, where was I before? Right, okay. Code. So this is going to go through a not find. So that didn't find it. Okay. What are we now? STR group is _management. Now, if I say, this is hard to show, but if I come through here, do one of them, now it won't show .enable because I'm in a presentation. Normally it would, but it won't here. So I'm going to quickly say $.enable. And it's true because it found management in my list of items. Okay. So that's going to finish off doing that. And I'm going to close that. It's only going to show us what we've done before. Don't be doing that. I've run this a million times and it hasn't done that. I'm going to say stop. And run this again. Well, the presenter's curse. How the hell did that happen? Accounts payable. Right, okay, I'm going to stop again because I don't want this to disrupt what we're doing.
Maybe you should exit out and re-enter. Yeah.
That's a good idea, actually.
It's
Thank you.
the curse of the demo gods. That's what
It is.
we
It's a
can't
demo.
get away without that. So we've all been there.
We started with IsOpMember. We've gone through that. Okay. The next item is get IADs We can do that before we go anywhere. Now, the first thing this will do is get IADs for the current user, the operator, if you like. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to find it in here. And I'm going to stop that there. So open it there. That will be empty. So get IADs. This time we're going to look at it because this is the time when it goes through the long way round. And that's only once. But if you remember, we said earlier that if STR ID is empty and the type is user, or the type is empty, we've called it with that empty, but it defaults to user, then it will get the current user for us, current operator. So go through there. These are things it will do if you specify special things. We'll get to that later. This is where we're at. So STR ID equals blank, which it is. If STR type is user, yes it is. Then we say, do we already have this STR operator DN? We do in this case, because we crashed earlier. And I'm going to say, no, we don't, because that shouldn't have happened. So we come down to here, and we're going to say, hang on, that is set. We don't go down to there, we go to else. So I'm going to say STRID is GetLogonName. Now that's another API call, but it's a standard one I've used for a long, long time. You will have that in your code, but that just gives me the value Adrian.Bell. Okay. I'm going to do a search for the root of my domain, and that code finds that for me, root DSE, gets an object, and then that object returns a root domain name in context. That's basically my domain in LDAP. And then when that's ready, I use that item. So we set str root as that big long LDAP string, and I'm going to get object that string, and that's going to be the first item I pass to process IADs. And that is going to go through my structure. You'll notice here you've got the bells local at the top, and then you've got various containers, and it's going to go all through all of those until it finds something that matches Adrian.Bell. Now, I'm not going to follow that because it's long-winded for tracing, but it does it. It takes a little bit longer than doing it the quick way. Okay? Now, actually, I want to show what happens when strOpdn is blank. So I'm going to say I'm going to cheat and trick it. So now strOpdn is blank. strtype is user. Get IADs object, in other words, the return value of this function is not nothing. And strid is GetLogonName. They're all going to be true. Went off into GetLogonName by mistake. Okay, so come back here. So this is now going to save that value, the distinguished name, from the object I already have into strOpdn. And that means that next time I come through and every subsequent time, instead of having to go through the loop, I can go straight to that item. Okay? So then it's going to say, it's found an object, it's happy with that. I'm also going to save the object name here at this level. So that one is now set. I'm going to come through here. This is going to reset my stuff, which we saw earlier. We've seen this earlier. But what we didn't see is this SID2 And this is possibly the most important part of what we're looking at. So I'm just going to quickly, we've gone through process IDs, not in detail, but it's there for anyone to look at. Now, this is the stuff that deals with SIDs. And bear in mind, there's two important things to worry about here. Okay, I'm going to go back here to show you've got the display version against the stored version. That's one issue. But when the API call gives you the display version, it doesn't give it to you in a format that VBA likes. VBA strings are different from the standard strings that C uses, and there are two items. If you look at API information, you'll see all in capitals CSTR and BSTR. CSTR is a null terminated string, generally ASCII, and it doesn't have a preceding length, whereas a BSTR, which is used in VBA, has a length before the string, and every character is a 2-byte Unicode value. Okay, so there are two hurdles we need to get past. We start with the definitions, declarations. These should all be viable for 32-bit and 64-bit. Thank you, Peter Cole, for that. And then we've got the two different bits of the code, and I will take you through those now, if you'll indulge me. So, first of all, we're going to go SID to SIDSTRA of varsid. Because that's a variant, and this SID to SIDSTRA expects a string, we convert it to a string first. So that's all that's doing. It's in string format, but it's a variant string format. So I go into SID to SIDSTRA. And you can read all that at a later stage. We talked about the stored version of the SID. That describes what that is. So that's all available to you. Right. The first thing we do is we get LenB of strcid. Now, LenB is different from len because len would give you the number of characters, whereas LenB always gives you the number of bytes, so the number of memory positions, if you like. And we'll see that the value here is 16, so we want a byte array of 0 to 15. It's hard to show that that's the case, but now this part is interesting because we are taking a string, which, as you know, is not really the sort of string that we want because it's essentially in C string format, CSTR format. It's got lots and lots of funny characters. However, it will be treated as a string. When we say copy that into a byte SID, it will do just that. And we'll get all of those bytes in the array set as the various different values in the string. Okay, I hope that makes sense. This isn't that straightforward to work with. Okay, now we get to probably the most complicated part. Convert SID to StringSid. Now, if you remember before, I was saying there were two hurdles to go past, and one of them is to get your funny storage of SID information into a display version that people could look at and recognize, okay? But one of the difficult things here is we're going to use this A byte SID 0 as the point where we need to start, okay? This is us pointing to where the string is that it can find that it has to convert into what we want. But notice, you don't just pass A byte SID. You don't just pass a string. You have to pass the pointer to that string. Okay? Now, varPutter does that for you. If I just very quickly look at the definition or the declaration of ConvertSidToStringSid, you'll notice that this value here, this SID value, is by val. This is a trick because we're actually saying we're going to give it a value that is the pointer. Normally you'd say pass by reference and it would take whatever is the pointer to the variable and pass that. We can't do that in VBA. Doesn't work, I'm afraid to say. So we have to get the pointer to that and then we pass that. And then this, which is, you'll notice here that we're passing a 0, but that's a long, long 0. So in 64 bits, long, it's a pointer. So it would be a long putter. In 32-bit, that would just be a long. Okay, but that is where we get the information back. Now, I'm just going to run that very quickly because what it has to do, it has to get an area of memory, put the string in, and then tell us where that's to be found. Now, and this is quite important, because this has done memory management outside of VBA, we are then responsible for releasing that memory later. So that LocalFree down there is what we're going to have to do later to release the memory that we didn't grab, VBA didn't grab. This was grabbed by ConvertSid, so basically the API call. And it gives it to us. Now LPT var, I can show you what this has given us. So if I say that, I'm going to do something sneaky now. I can find it. Here it is. So go to that address. I printed it in hex because that's what this works with most easily. Right, it's up the top there. Say go again, so it's in the middle. That's Not the ones I was expecting, but this is one of the, yes, this is one of the SIDs of the groups, but it's a standard group, so it's not one from our domain. So what that tells me that what I need to do here is skip this one. I'll come back in here and do this again and get to this point. I'm not interested in the first two, but I know the third one. Now we have this, should be a different value, hopefully. Move across to where we can actually see what the memory is doing. And it's down the bottom there. I'll do it again. The highlighted bit on the left is the hexadecimal characters. You will notice what's important is that each position has a different character in it. This is not good for VBA. You'll also notice at the end, it finishes with a 00 character. That's a null char. Okay. Slightly to the right, where it can, it shows what's displayed on the left in ASCII. So you can see that that SID string looks perfectly formatted SID string, but it's all in ASCII, not in Unicode. Okay, but it's the value. It's the value that we want. Okay, so back to here. Now we have this pointer. This is a pointer to that string. We need to call string C2 VBA in order to convert that from a C-stra into a B-stra, which is useful for what we need to use in VBA. So that's down below here. Okay, we've got the long pointer. That's the long pointer. You see the caret at the end shows it's a long pointer. Normally, if we want the length of something, we say len and then pass the variable. But what's different here is we're not after the length of this variable, because that would just be 8 or 16 or whatever. What we're after is the length of the value that this variable is pointing to. So it's basically going to get us the length of that string we just looked at. That says 45. If we bosh back across quickly, each of these rows is 16 long. So 316 is 48. This takes up 3 shorter than that, so it's 45. So we know that that return value is perfect. Okay. We then read in another byte array. We dealt with byte arrays before. We're going to do the same thing, 0 to that len minus 1. So it's going to be 0 to 44. And then we do another API call, which is CopyMemory. Now, CopyMemory is copy to from length. Not from to, it's copy to from. So, again, we are getting the address of this information, A byte data, not the one that we had before, but A byte data. We're going to say var putter of that, so it gets to the right point. That is the destination. Okay, we've created, we've redeemed the array, but we haven't put any data in it yet. And then we're going to say the pointer to the source information, as well as the size. And notice we do not copy the null character at the end. Okay, so that runs, and it works perfectly well. Okay, and the last thing we do is we now have our information in A byte data, but we also have a method or a function that gives us the ability to switch our string into Unicode format as one of its options. So VB Unicode in a StrConv will convert that data into Unicode and store the result in the function return. So if we now look here, you'll notice that is exactly the data that we had, but converted into a BSTR value. Then, as we said before, we have to free up the memory that was used to help get us to where we are. And that's another API call. this same LPT var, that same pointer, it will now free that. We're now free to come through here. That's getting one of the SIDs into a display format from the stored format. And when we've finished, I'll come down to here. STR SIDs is now a big long list of display format SID values with commas in between each value. Okay? What's the time? 1:45. So we're nearly ready to finish. I'm going to F5 that and it's going to crash because it does. I will find out what causes that, but not in the middle of a presentation. Hopefully that's given some understanding of how that code is working. Okay, so after that, ready for any questions?
So questions-wise, Philip asked what you were using for your memory editor, but I did put a link to that already in the chat. So see the chat for the answer to that. Unless you want to say anything specific about that one, I think that question is answered. And then Andrew has a question. He says, if the IT team at the client adds a completely new AD group, for example, facilities, is it possible to have the Access application automatically see those new groups and use them? Or would you have to add code or forms to reflect these new accounts? So did you understand that question okay?
I think I did. The database was designed to show that. What I did was actually change which groups I was a member of, not create and add new groups, but it would be effectively the same. My security has been updated. If a new group were added, but the current user's account were not added to that group, even as an effective member, then it wouldn't change anything. But do be aware, if I take you back to, let's have a look. The code, have I got the right code here? I don't think I include that actually. IsOpMember. Yes, this refresh thing. So I actually added this ability to refresh. You can actually tell the code to ask again what groups it's effective members of. Normally, you would get that once. I mean, the way I envisage this working is that you'd get that once, and if IT went along and changed the security structure, you'd close Access and start it again, because it's not something that happens frequently. But for this demo, I needed to show that it could be done. I didn't actually create new groups, but the being a member of changed, so I had to do a refresh. Does that answer your question clearly?
And you can come off mute at this point to, respond to him. I would say to keep in mind that I've used this kind of stuff myself within Access applications, but in general, the direction I'm looking at it is this function in my program requires access or being a member of a particular group. That's kind of the role. I use it as a role. And so obviously, if they add a new group called finance or whatever, and your program doesn't require the finance role for anything, then, you do need to add that to your program if you want that particular security to be used. So in that way, you would have to modify to look at that. But
I guess one of the things I was thinking of was if, for example, you had a user management screen in your database and you wanted to select the user and it lists in a list box, maybe, the list of AD groups that this person is in. If IT go and add a new group called, facilities or finance or whatever it is, would that group automatically appear in your list box? Are you able to see new groups and so on being added and add people to them? Obviously, you'd need to add new screens for what financy or what facilities people would do. But the basic idea of saying, here's the list of existing groups and allow people to be added to those groups or whatever, is that something that, or to reflect which group people are part of? Would that work if new groups were added?
Sorry, Andrew, we don't do the management of the accounts in the groups. That's entirely separate. I mean, obviously I've done it because I'm also administrator, but just to illustrate, but that is something outside of the scope of the access using this security. So there's
would it see the new groups? I mean, like you say, you manage them elsewhere.
Well, you'd have to add the current user, the operator of the thing using access, would have to be added as a member or just an effective member of the new group. Once that is done, yes, it would show up in here once it's refreshed.
Cool, thank you.
Another question is from Neil. Is there not an API function which simply returns if the user is a member of a group? And Leo suggests maybe using WMI. Can you address that?
I can address that. I believe there might be. Fell over it, discovered it late on in the process of producing this. So at some future date, I might explore, rather than using LDAP at all, I could go straight into the API to find all the information I need.
If someone on the call is aware of something specific, Neil says Dale Phi has demonstrated a method. That'd be fun to bring up, at least. Do you have a link to it or anything, Neil?
He published a database which basically did it in 2 lines of code. It says GetObject to see the domain, and then GetObject to see if your user, and then it just says whether the user is a member of a group as a Boolean return.
Are you talking about using an API call or WMI?
Neither. It's directly in Windows NT. The actual objects that he's using, by the looks of it, are, he's named them ActiveDS.IAD user and ActiveDS IAD group.
So when he says get object, what does he pass in the string as the protocol definer?
WinNT : // It's sort of built into Windows.
Okay. Yes, that uses the SAM database. If you're using workgroups, that will be helpful. If you're using Active Directory, it won't.
Ah, good.
One of the things I do plan to do is make this flexible so that it can also use the WinNT option that you're talking about, which works with workgroups.
Active domain is what you're saying.
Indeed. It's not Active Directory. It's not domain Active Directory. It uses the old SAM database from old NT4 times.
Thank you. I knew you wouldn't have gone off on boys.
It's consistent with that old stuff, but it's also used for workgroups that are essentially standalone NT. So if you're not on a domain, you'll have a SAM database. It's far more straightforward. It doesn't have hierarchical containers or anything. It's just got users and groups.
And it's not upward compatible. If you join a domain, it doesn't work. It only looks at local security.
You actually have both available. On my computer here, this is a member of a domain. I'm logged in as a domain account, but I could also log in as a local account on the SAM database.
And the security I'm talking about only applies to the SAM database, doesn't look at active domain groups.
Right. Certainly WinNT, the WinNT protocol is less fully featured than the LDAP. So if it can work with the Active Directory, and I don't know that it can, it might be able to, then it's certainly still a cut down version from using LDAP. So I wouldn't use it if I had the choice.
Understood. Thanks.
Okay. And WMI, yes, there's sort of things you can do. I don't want to bring WMI in. I don't want to bring anything into it that I don't have to. I've brought in API calls, obviously. I've started with LDAP because I saw some code at one point which used LDAP and it got my interest. I'm not suggesting this is necessarily the best or only way of doing it, but it's a working version. There are all sorts of scripting things that you could link into your code. I choose to avoid where I can. Where I can do it more natively, I will. Okay? Any other questions or clarifications of anything that I said but didn't get across clearly?
Well, I was just going to say, Adrian, the list of API functions I sent you this morning has got 65 functions in there which have got group in their name. So you might find that you've got something suitable.
Peter, that's for later. Thank you very much. Thank you again. But that's no part of this, as far as I understand.
All right.
Okay.
So I did just post a link to Adrian's presentation and database that I've uploaded to the files section of the lunchtime member dashboard. You do have to be a member of the Access Lunchtime, AccessUserGroups.org. But if you're not, you can request to become a member and we'll grant that shortly, and then you could get to that link. There was one other question here that James asked, and then Crystal has a comment. James' questions is, are there code changes needed if you're using Microsoft Entra ID or Azure Active Directory? And then Crystal mentions that Microsoft Graph API also has security information. So that's really kind of a question and a comment, but maybe if you know anything or have time to address differences in those, I think that would be helpful and interesting to the group.
Sure. Not a great deal. Entra, is that Entra the new name? I forget. Anyway,
Yes, Microsoft Entra ID is the new name for Azure Active Directory.
Thank you. This doesn't use that.
It's been my experience that companies that use that often have a local instance of Active Directory, that there's a sync process that goes on. So if that's the case, you might still be able to use this technique with their local part of it, not directly with the Azure part.
My understanding, and it may not be perfect, is that when you sign into Entra ID, you sign in separately from the account that you sign into your desktop from. So you sign into your desktop using the Active Directory domain security. Then if you want to connect to things remotely on Azure, then you have to sign in separately to Azure or Entra. I only have access, I'm only aware of, I may have access, but I'm not aware of having, I certainly don't know that I've got access or how to use getting hold of the Entra account name, because the account name that I get hold of is what is provided by Windows, the latest version. That tells me what is the account that I've used to log on, but log on to the desktop, not, as far as I'm aware, log on to Entra ID. There is probably something that would work in parallel for Entra ID, but you would need to make the request of, presumably not the desktop, but Entra, make the request saying, what account am I logged in as? And that would be not something that I would expect the desktop to know. It's certainly worth exploring. I don't have it myself and I haven't done any work on that, but it's certainly worth exploring. Would you remind me, what was the other question? That was a two-part question. One was Entra ID and the other was something else.
The other is from Crystal that made the comment that Microsoft Graph API also has security information. I think the answer to that is you can use the Microsoft Graph API to get some of the Azure Active Directory information. But again, you have to sign in, and it's not usually the same as your desktop. Like, for instance, my desktop is set up in its own, I don't know, I'm on Windows 11. I think it might have to do something with my Gmail account or something like that, and I can access it from my phone and my desktop. It has nothing to do with my Azure Active Directory.
So Windows Graph, I haven't explored that. It may well provide the same information. However, from what you've just said, what Crystal says it can do, it sounds more like it's Entra ID related.
That would be the only thing that you can get through there.
But it's not doing the
will
same
not
job.
be getting the local.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in my experience, when you're dealing with access, mostly you want to know what they're signed in as locally. But that may be different. People may be doing access using their Entra IDs on virtual machines somewhere, in which case that would become an issue. It's not something I can help with at the moment because I don't have any experience there.
This is our May meeting, and the Access Lunchtime group, although we meet monthly, takes a break in the summer, and we do not have a meeting or a user group presentation in either June or July. But we will be back at the last Tuesday of August and start up our fall session. I am hoping that one or two of the planned items that are on the roadmap for Access to be released this summer get released to the beta channel, and that I can, demo one or more of those at the August meeting. We will see. And thank you very much, Adrian. This is very interesting, and feel free to pass on any further information, especially about if there's simplified ways of doing this as you explore more.
Yes, I will. I've had someone say, I want to know how to do it on the work groups using the WinNT that Neil mentioned. So I will be looking at that. That's the first time that thing's crashed on me. All that time it hasn't crashed.
Of course. And you'll find it afterwards. John wants to know where you get an access fleece like you are reporting today.
Sure, I just saw that. It's not a fleece. This one is just a very thin nylon access polo shirt. And we got it from the Access team.
Yeah, I see that now. So maybe they should make a fleece.
I think some of the stuff might be available in the Microsoft store.
Oh, cool.
But I don't know what all is there. If you Google Microsoft Store, they do have an online store.
It's interesting because two of the things that I'm actually very interested in myself were brought up by people in the comments. One is when Neil mentioned the WinNT stuff, well, essentially the workgroup stuff. Even before I started, that was something that I wanted to get dovetailed into this so they can both work, and if one fails, it switches to the other sort of thing. But the other thing is, actually, if there's an API call, and Peter Cole was helpful in mentioning that there are a number of them, would that bypass both? Would I not have to use LDAP, not use WinNT at all? I say, would the code not have to use any of those and just ask, am I a member of this group? And that is obviously a cleaner and neater solution, but what I've got is actually a solution. My main interest was to make sure I put down a solution. But yeah, I'd like to refine it and get something that's even better if I can.
Well, I will say that I'm impressed. I myself have been using the GetLogonName scenario for quite some time, and I like that, and I use it to look up then what user I'm talking about in the user table, and then I've got like the user IDs as the key to that table. And I often have like a role table. Sometimes that's managed by Access. Sometimes in one client, I have it managed through Active Directory, actually, but that's like a sync process that goes on, not in the Access technology. And then I just access that resulting table from Microsoft Access. So to be able to actually do this from within Access, I think is a huge plus.
The benefit that I see is that if you're using SQL Server backend, for instance, and pass-through security, as I would recommend, then when you try and do something you shouldn't do, it's going to crash. But you don't want it to crash. You don't want an error message. You want it to stop you going there in the first place. And that's what this allows you to do. It allows you to stop the operator from even trying to get to information he shouldn't have any business touching.
Well, and the other thing you can do sometimes, and is important to do for some systems, is is log when did someone try to access your system and they didn't have the authority to do so. So this would help allow you to log that kind of stuff as well.
Mm-hmm. Although I think I prefer the approach where instead of them trying, it doesn't even appear for them, like it's disabled. If it shows at all, it's helpful if it shows, because then at least you recognize you're on the same form as someone else, even though different things are enabled. If it's disabled, they can't put their fingers in the cookie jar.
Well, and we have the added benefit for Microsoft Access is that it's file-based. So if your directory structure is also role-based, then if they don't have the role to access your application, then they shouldn't be able to get to it at all, right? So you can also have that layer.
Works for me.
I'll just point out that Crystal put a Access Talk Discord invite link on the chat. We do have a Discord channel. If you might have been previously using Skype to chat with people and you know that Skype has recently disappeared, think about that as a replacement.
One thing I'd add is that although you're all invited to the Access Talk server, you don't have to be a member of the Access Talk server to be able to talk with other people on Discord. You can do member to member without even sharing the same servers if you want to. James.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I've been using my own security code, for decades. Roles, users, and have flags, down to the button level of what a particular user can do. Because you don't always know on groups if some IT person came up with a new group and you're a member of that. Like what does that mean to us? And what functions should they have or not have or something. So I think maintaining control over that is still important. And yes, I'm also doing more with Azure and SQL Server, and there is a registry setting that you can see what you've logged in on for the Microsoft account or your email. I think maybe Mike Wolf came up with some code, but I haven't had 100% success on using that registry too. Microsoft changes stuff. Who knows if they'll change any of the code into your directory.
Okay. I'm not sure if I got all of that, but you did mention at one point that it was important to have control over who was what in the security structure. Are you talking about the Access developer having control, or for the client and their IT department to have control?
Well, if they were a super user in my system, then they can go in and change their users' privileges, right within Access. Or if I'm the guy, then I'd go in and set up a new user if they have no IT department.
Be clear, James. What I presented today was the complete antithesis of that. I'm saying do not manage your own security. Anytime you do and you get hacked, you then become responsible. You probably won't have any blowback, because it's very rare to get blowback, but there's possibilities there. Beyond that, if you're managing your own security and you've got a client who has an IT department and they're suspicious of anything Access related, then you're going to be on their radar. Whereas if instead of rolling your own, you work seamlessly with an existing setup that they've already got and they manage and take responsibility for, then that lets you relax about any responsibility for the security. So long as you follow their structure, and it's essentially it's their business, so they have the right to control the security elements of the business. And that's what I'm suggesting today, is that you work within the existing security setup rather than roll your own.
So I definitely agree with you that, yes, but my point still is if they set up a group called finance how does my system know what that means and what menu items they have? Or
that's you talking with the client, because the client is going to know about this, and they're going to say, oh, we've got, I mean, they're not going to set up a new one called finance, because that's going to be one of the original ones. Before you ever set anything up for them in a project, they'll have included finance. However, if there's a new one that comes along and they want you to do something related to that area of the business, say it's manufacturing. So they want to do something related to manufacturing. They're going to set up a new group. You haven't got anything in your code yet, but then they ask you to change your system to handle manufacturing. As part of that process, you will make sure that only the people in the manufacturing group have access to the new part of your system that you're setting up for them.
So you're still translating. Yeah, you're still translating what they want and modifying your system. A lot of my clients are nonprofits. They have no IT department, so I am their IT department.
And that's
but I see your point, and well presented.
So long as you keep the security role that you do for them separate from the access developer role. If you've got a client, I mean, maybe they're small clients, they don't care, but in most cases, if your software does its own security, you're going to get into problems. Anyway, sorry, I'm going to have to go very shortly. Neil, put your hand up. If it can be very quick, Neil, I'll stay and see if I can answer.
No, I was just going to say to James, if IT come along and put a new group in called finance, if your Access application isn't about finance, what do you care? It's only when they come to you and say, I want our finance members to be able to do this with your application, that you even hear about it.
I basically agree. That's exactly how I reacted to the question. So I will say thank you all very much, and I will have to disappear.
Thank you, Adrian. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Awesome, Adrian. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all for joining us. All right, you guys have a great summer.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Maria.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.